think monkey see, monkey do is simple. Well, in clinical practice, if you just show a learner what to do without checking their prerequisite skills, you're not teaching. You're just performing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just theater at that point.
Right. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're taking a magnifying glass to how we, design and evaluate modeling procedures. We are pulling insights from foundational texts, specifically Cooper, and advancing into real-world applications from the supervisor's guidebook.
And we're also stress testing these concepts against some pretty advanced mock exams, right?
Exactly, yeah. The goal here is to extract the exact clinical precision you need to tackle the BACB task list item G9. So you don't just, understand modeling on paper, but you can actually wield it like a top-tier practitioner.
Okay.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I feel like we use modeling all the time without thinking about the mechanics.
Oh, absolutely. People tend to treat it as a default setting. Like, you want a client to build a block tower. You stack the blocks. You want someone to wave, you wave.
Yeah.
But functionally, from a strict behavioral standpoint, modeling is a response prompt.
Yeah.
It operates directly on the behavior you want the learner to perform.
Let's break that down for a second.
Sure.
Operating directly on the behavior as opposed to altering the stimulus.
Right.
So, I'm not making the block they need to pick up brighter or larger because that would be a stimulus prompt, right?
Exactly, yes.
I'm demonstrating the exact topographical response I want them to emit.
It's all about formal similarity. When you use a modeling procedure, the learner's behavior really must physically resemble the model. And it must occur immediately following the presentation of that model.
Immediate being the key word there.
Yes. The model itself serves as the controlling variable for the imitated behavior. If there's a delay or, if the action doesn't look like what you just demonstrated, imitation has not occurred. And this is where we really have to draw a hard clinical line between imitation and observational learning.
Oh, man, I hear those terms used interchangeably all the time, even in clinical settings.
They are, but the mechanism behind them is completely different.
Well, think about it like this. If I'm standing in line at a coffee shop and I see the person in front of me try to order like a seasonal latte and the barista tells them it's sold out, I'm going to change my order.
Right, right.
But I didn't imitate the person in front of me. I modified my behavior based on the punishing contingency I observed them experience.
That is observational learning, perfectly described. You watched a contingency unfold for someone else, and it altered your future behavior.
Yeah.
Imitation training, which is what we're facilitating when we use modeling procedures, requires the learner to actively reproduce the modeled motor action. And, well, to reproduce a motor action, the learner has to possess a very specific set of foundational component skills.
Which brings up a critical point about prerequisites. It's somewhat like watching a high-end cooking show.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Right. Just because Gordon Ramsay shows you exactly how to debone a duck on television doesn't mean you can actually do it in your kitchen.
No, definitely not.
If you don't even possess the component skill of how to properly hold a boning knife, watching him do it 100 times won't magically bridge that neurological gap. The component skills have to be there first.
The clinical reality is even more granular than the cooking analogy, actually. Let's look at the basketball coach, detailed in the Cooper source material.
Okay.
So, the coach uses modeling to show a player the proper form for shooting a free throw. Now, that modeling functions as a highly effective prompt, but solely because the player already possesses the underlying component behaviors.
Like holding the ball.
Exactly. They can independently hold a basketball, they can lift it above their head, and they have the physical strength to push it forward.
Right. If they couldn't even grip the ball, your perfect free throw demonstration is essentially useless. You're just putting on a show at that point.
It is clinical theater, like we said earlier. Take a much more severe example from the texts. Imagine a practitioner trying to teach a child with a severe physical disability how to tie their shoes using a visual model.
Okay, yeah.
If that specific child does not yet have the fine motor pincer grasp required to physically pinch and hold the shoelaces, the intervention is doomed before it even begins.
Because the pathways aren't there?
Exactly. The neurological pathways for those component motor movements simply aren't established yet. No amount of modeling will bypass the need for that physical prerequisite. The component behavior is missing, meaning the response class cannot be shaped.
Wow. So if the stakes are that high for having the right prerequisites, how do we actually evaluate if a modeling procedure is appropriate before we, dive into full-blown teaching?
Well, we can't just assume they have the skills. We have to probe for them.
Right. There's a specific scenario in one of the mock exams we reviewed. Maggie's imitation pretest, I think it was,
Yeah.
that completely deconstructs this evaluation process.
Yeah, the pretest phase is a diagnostic tool. When you're conducting an imitation pretest to evaluate the potential efficacy of modeling, your data collection really has to be relentlessly specific.
Meaning you can't just mark yes or no.
Exactly. The clinician records the number of correct responses, the number of incorrect responses, and crucially, any approximations of the model.
Let's hover on approximations for a minute because they seem like the unsung heroes of baseline data.
They really are.
If I model tapping a block with a stick and the client picks up the stick and just touches the block, I mean, they don't tap it the way I did, but they bring the items together. I need to capture that.
Yes, you do.
But why? Like, why does a technically wrong answer matter so much in this phase?
Because it reveals the mechanism of stimulus control.
Oh, interesting.
If the client makes an approximation, it tells the clinician that the visual model is starting to exert some level of control over their motor behavior, even if the topography is imperfect.
The signal is getting through.
Precisely. They recognize that your action requires a corresponding action with those specific objects. If you only track binary correct or incorrect data, you miss that crucial neurological bridge.
You'd be throwing out incredibly valuable clinical information. It also struck me what the mock exams explicitly say you do not track during a pretest. Like you don't calculate trials to criterion and you don't track progress over time.
Well, because you aren't teaching yet.
Right.
There is no set mastery criteria during a pretest because you are merely probing for existing repertoires. Your singular objective is to answer the question, can this learner imitate this specific model right now under these exact environmental conditions?
Because attending and prerequisite skills are so easily overlooked in the chaos of a clinic, we really need to talk about the traps.
Oh, the traps are everywhere.
The common mistakes practitioners make when they try to bypass these mechanics. And the first, arguably the most fatal trap, is ignoring attending.
Huge issue.
I used to think of attending as just making sure the client was physically in the room, but it's much more active than that, isn't it?
It is. Think of attending like a radio transmission. You can be broadcasting the clearest, most perfectly executed clinical model on a massive, high-powered transmitter. But if the learner's receiver is not tuned to your specific frequency, like if they're looking at the ceiling fan, engaging in vocal stereotypy, or fixated on an iPad across the room, your broadcast functionally does not exist in their environment.
Wow. The visual prompt never registered?
Exactly.
So you have to secure attending before you even initiate the model. The model itself cannot be the thing that grabs their attention. Their attention must be secured before the model occurs.
That is the crucial sequence, yes.
That makes sense. But here is the second trap, and I'll admit this is an assumption I've made in the past. I've always assumed you have to pair a model with a verbal instruction.
Yes.
Like saying, do this or copy me while you stack the blocks. If they don't have the receptive language to know what do this means, doesn't the entire modeling procedure just fall apart?
It is a massive clinical misconception to assume verbal comprehension is a prerequisite for motor imitation.
Wait, really?
Yes. The mock exam sources, specifically Mock 3, question 31, aggressively test this exact blind spot. A learner needs the physical component behaviors, and they need to be attending to your frequency, but they explicitly do not need the ability to follow verbal directions.
So the visual model itself is the entire prompt.
The visual demonstration is the controlling variable, period.
Oh, wow.
If a clinician delays imitation training because a client doesn't yet have a receptive language repertoire, they are fundamentally misunderstanding how modeling works. You're essentially denying the client access to a crucial foundational learning pathway because of a completely unrelated skill deficit.
That's a great point.
Humans learn through observation and imitation long before they acquire their first spoken word.
That is a total paradigm shift. You don't hold up a client's motor programming waiting for a verbal repertoire that isn't actually required.
Exactly.
Okay, let's look at the third trap, which shifts us from client programming to staff management. And this is a big one, using modeling as a crutch for staff training.
Yes, the classic show and tell.
Right. A supervisor walks into a session, shows a technician how to run a complex differential reinforcement procedure once, asks, "Makes sense," and then leaves. And a week later, treatment integrity is sitting at like 40%.
Because modeling gives the supervisor a false sense of productivity.
Wow, yeah.
The supervisor feels they've taught the skill simply because they successfully performed it themselves. But modeling is a necessary component of training, not a sufficient one. If you model a clinical procedure, without directly observing the staff member immediately imitating that exact skill, and without providing feedback, you are setting the intervention up for failure.
The technician hasn't acquired the muscle memory. They haven't built fluency.
And we know definitively that poor plan implementation is one of the primary barriers to effective behavior change. A brilliantly conceptualized behavior plan is entirely useless if the person running it cannot execute the mechanics with high fidelity.
Because the certification board knows how often these traps occur in the real world, they test them ruthlessly. So let's look at the exam strategy. How do these clinical realities translate to the way Pearson VUE structures their questions?
The exam logic is entirely based on the mechanisms we just discussed.
So what are we looking for?
If you encounter a scenario asking for the absolute gatekeeper prerequisite skill a learner must demonstrate before participating in imitation training, the logic dictates you choose attending.
Attending.
Okay, this is directly supported by both the Cooper text and the Wizard mock exams. Without attending, the visual stimulus never enters the learner's functional environment.
What about those tricky exit questions? Those usually throw people off because you have to hunt for the false statement.
Right, those are tough. If you see a scenario asking what is accepted or not required for a learner to possess, when you are using modeling as a response prompt, you look for follow verbal directions.
Because it's a visual prompt.
Exactly. The exam wants to see if you will fall for the trap of thinking receptive language is required for motor imitation.
And when it comes to identifying the prompt type itself,
if the question describes a clinician physically demonstrating a task, you are identifying a response prompt.
not a stimulus prompt.
Correct. The mechanism here is that modeling acts directly on the response the learner is supposed to emit. It does not alter the antecedent materials.
The logic makes perfect sense when you understand the why behind it. Now, modeling isn't just about teaching early learners to tap blocks or, teenagers to shoot free throws. In the context of performance management for supervisors and clinical directors, it scales up significantly.
It really does.
Especially when we look at the material from the supervisor's guidebook regarding distance supervision and telehealth.
This is where we see the true clinical power of video modeling. When a clinical director cannot be physically present in the room with every technician, video modeling becomes the backbone of shaping staff behavior. And it is empirically validated.
So we are talking about recording a competent clinician running a procedure perfectly, maybe discrete trial instruction or a paired stimulus preference assessment, and using that as the training module.
Yes, usually layered with a voiceover instruction that explains the exact contingencies at play in real time.
Oh, that makes sense.
The research shows this is highly effective for training staff on complex clinical repertoires. However, we have to connect this right back to the trap we just discussed about staff training crutches.
Right. If just showing them a live model isn't enough, then just emailing them a video link certainly isn't going to cut it either.
It is the exact same mechanism. The video model merely provides the instructional antecedent. The actual acquisition of the clinical skill occurs during the practice and feedback loop.
The follow-through.
A top-tier BCBA follows up that video modeling with active role-play, direct in vivo practice, and immediate corrective feedback. This is the core engine of behavioral skills training.
It bridges the gap between a written behavior plan on a PDF and the messy, on-the-ground execution in a client's living room. If you don't follow the video model with direct observation, the technician is going to experience treatment drift.
Inevitably.
They'll start missing the precise timing of reinforcement, or they'll fail to fade their own prompts, and the client's progress will just stall out.
The supervisor's guidebook makes it explicitly clear. When supervisors fail to routinely monitor and provide feedback on the modeled skills, non-proficient work is the guaranteed result. The video modeling is the spark, but the active practice and the corrective feedback are the oxygen that keeps the clinical fire burning.
If this helped you, follow behavioral intelligence, share this episode with another RBT or BCBA who's studying, and leave a comment or review. That's how we grow and how I keep creating high-level content for you.
At Amethyst Therapy Services, Inc., we build clinicians, not just cast passers. You can find us at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or email us at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final conceptual puzzle to mull over. We've talked extensively about how to model a skill, how to secure attending, and how to evaluate approximations. But imagine this clinical scenario. If a learner perfectly imitates a modeled behavior, but they only ever emit that behavior when the specific trainer who taught them is standing right there in the room. Have they truly acquired the skill?
That's the real question.
Or are they just stuck under faulty stimulus control? Think about how you must program for generalization from day one so that the specific response you are modeling today actually becomes their independent, generalized behavior tomorrow. Keep analyzing, keep pushing your practice, and we'll catch you on a next deep dive.